Judge sentences killer of his 4-year-old daughter to death. He showed absolutely no remorse. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The courtroom was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from respect. This was the silence of shock. The kind that makes your chest tighten and your breath catch somewhere between your lungs and your throat. A man in an orange jumpsuit stood before the judge's bench. His wrists were cuffed, but his posture was relaxed, almost casual. He wasn't looking down at the floor like most defendants do. He wasn't trembling or praying for mercy. He was smiling. In his cuffed hands he held a photograph, a small picture no bigger than a wallet-sized school photo. He turned it slowly, deliberately, so everyone in the courtroom could see it. A little girl, 4 years old, blonde hair, bright eyes, a smile that could light up a room. Then he lifted his gaze and locked eyes with the man sitting above him, Judge Thomas Ashford. The judge's face went white. His hands gripped the edge of the bench so hard his knuckles turned the color of bone. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Just a choked, guttural sound. Then his face twisted, his shoulders shook. And in front of a packed courtroom, in front of cameras and reporters and 100 strangers, Judge Thomas Ashford broke. He sobbed. Not quiet tears. Not restrained emotion. He sobbed like a man whose soul had been ripped out of his chest. The man in orange didn't flinch. He just stood there, holding the photo, smiling that cold, hollow smile. The bailiff stepped forward, but the judge waved him off. Ashford wiped his face with trembling hands, struggled to steady his breath, and reached for the paper in front of him. His voice cracked as he read the sentence. Caleb Rourke, you are hereby sentenced to death. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, whispers. A few people stood up. Cameras flashed, but through it all, Caleb Rourke just stood there, still smiling, like he'd already won. A voice cut through the chaos. Calm, steady, almost conversational. A lot of people saw that video. What nobody knew was how this story started, or how it really ended. The screen froze on Ashford's tear-streaked face. Then it cut to black. 6 months earlier. The sun was setting over a quiet suburban street. Judge Thomas Ashford sat in his car outside his ex-wife's house, staring at the front door. He'd been sitting there for 10 minutes. He did this sometimes. Just sat, watched, made sure everything looked normal. He wasn't welcome inside anymore. The divorce had been finalized 2 years ago. Clean. Professional. No drama. Just two people who'd stopped being able to live together. But there was one thing that still connected them. Lena, his daughter, 4 years old, blonde hair, bright eyes, a smile that could light up. He shook his head and turned the key in the ignition. He had work to do. Case to review. A decision to make. Later that night, sitting in his home office, Ashford read through a police request for a search warrant. The case was thin, circumstantial at best. No hard evidence, no probable cause. He picked up his pen and stamped it. Denied. He didn't look at the name on the... If he had, he might have noticed it. Caleb Rourke. Ashford closed the file and set it aside. Another case, another decision. It was all routine. But somewhere, in a different part of the city, a phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen. It's done, he denied it. And in the darkness of a small apartment, someone smiled. Thomas Ashford's life was built on order. Every morning he woke at 5:45 a.m., coffee at 6, shower at 6:15, in his car by 7, at his desk by 7:30. The routine never changed. Not on weekdays, not on weekends, not even on holidays. People who knew him said he was cold, detached, a man who lived inside his own head, guided by logic and law, untouched by the messiness of human emotion. They weren't entirely wrong. Ashford had spent 23 years on the bench, 23 years of listening to lies, sorting through evidence, and making decisions that altered lives. He'd sent people to prison. He'd granted freedom. He'd ruled on custody battles, property disputes, and crimes that would make most people sick to their stomach, and he'd done it all without flinching. Because that's what the law required. Impartiality, objectivity, a clear line between right and wrong, drawn not by feeling but by fact. But there was one crack in that armor. Lena, his daughter, the only person who could make him smile without effort, the only voice that could pull him out of his own mind and into the present moment. He saw her every other weekend. Court-mandated custody. His ex-wife, Marion, had primary custody. It was fair. He knew that. He'd agreed to it. His schedule didn't allow for full-time parenting. His work came first. It always had. But when he saw Lena, something shifted. The walls came down. Just a little. Just enough. She was 4 now. Old enough to talk in full sentences. Old enough to ask questions he didn't always know how to answer. "Daddy, why don't you live with us anymore?" He never had a good answer for that one. On a Tuesday morning, Ashford sat in his chambers reviewing case files. His clerk, a young woman named Diane, knocked softly on the door. "Judge, the Matthews hearing is in 20 minutes. "Thank you, Diane." She hesitated. "There's also a situation. A man was here earlier asking about a case you denied last week." "A warrant request." Ashford looked up. "Which case?" "The Rourke file." He wanted to know why it was denied. Ashford frowned. Who was asking? He didn't give a name, but he left this. She handed him a business card, plain white, no logo, just a name printed in black ink. Caleb Rourke. Ashford stared at it for a moment, then set it on his desk. "If he comes back, tell security." "Yes, sir." Diane left, closing the door behind her. Ashford picked up the card again. The name was vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. He denied dozens of warrants every month. Most of them deserved to be denied. Weak cases, overreaching prosecutors, police fishing for evidence they didn't have. It was his job to hold the line. He tossed the card into the trash and moved on. That night, Marion called. "Thomas, I need to talk to you about something." Her voice was tight, controlled, the way it always was when she was trying not to sound upset. "What is it?" "There was a man outside the house today, just standing there watching." Ashford sat up straighter. "Did you call the police?" "I did. They came by, but he was gone by then. They said it was probably nothing. Maybe a delivery driver or someone lost." "Did you get a description?" "Tall, dark coat." "That's all I saw before I closed the curtains." Ashford's jaw tightened. "Keep the doors locked. If you see him again, call me immediately." "I will." There was a pause. "Thomas, do you think this has anything to do with your work?" "I don't know." But even as he said it, something cold settled in his chest. The next morning, Ashford arrived at the courthouse early. He went straight to the records office and pulled the Rourke file. The case was simple. Police suspected Caleb Rourke of involvement in a fraud scheme. They wanted to search his apartment, but the evidence was circumstantial. No hard proof. No smoking gun. Ashford had denied the warrant because it didn't meet the legal threshold. It was the right call. He'd make the same decision again. But as he flipped through the file, something caught his eye. A note in the margin, handwritten by one of the detectives. Subject has history with Judge Ashford. See attached. Ashford frowned and flipped to the next page. And then he saw it. A case from 8 years ago. A corruption trial. A former prosecutor who'd been caught taking bribes, falsifying evidence, destroying careers. The prosecutor's name, Caleb Rourke. The judge who'd sentenced him, Thomas Ashford. Ashford's blood went cold. He remembered now. He remembered the trial. He remembered the man standing in the defendant's box, defiant even as the verdict was read. He remembered the sentence, 5 years in prison, disbarment, and the destruction of everything Rourke had built. And he remembered the look Rourke had given him. Not anger, not rage, just cold certainty, like a man making a promise. Ashford closed the file slowly. His phone buzzed. A text from Marion. He's back. The man is outside again. Ashford's hands shook as he dialed Marion's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Thomas, lock the doors. Don't go outside. I'm calling the police right now. I already did. They're on their way. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the fear underneath. The kind of fear you try to hide but can't. Is Lena with you? She's upstairs. Playing. She doesn't know anything's wrong. Keep it that way. Ashford hung up and immediately called the local precinct. He identified himself, explained the situation, and demanded a patrol car be sent immediately. The dispatcher assured him units were already en route. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Diane looked up from her desk. Judge, you're hearing. Postpone it. He didn't wait for a response. By the time Ashford arrived at Marion's house, there were 2 police cars parked outside. Officers were walking the perimeter, checking windows, looking for signs of forced entry. Marion stood in the doorway, arms crossed tightly over her chest. When she saw him, some of the tension in her shoulders released. He's gone, she said quietly. They checked everywhere. No sign of him. Did you get a better look this time? She shook her head. Just a shape through. The window, dark coat, same as before. One of the officers approached. Young, mid-20s. He had the kind of face that still believed the world made sense. Judge Ashford, we've swept the area. No one's here now. We'll increase patrols in the neighborhood for the next few days. That's not enough. The officer hesitated. Sir, with all due respect, we can't station someone here full-time without evidence of a direct threat. A man is stalking my ex-wife's house. We don't know that for sure. It could be a coincidence. Someone lost. A contractor checking the wrong address. Ashford stared at him. Do you believe that? The officer looked away. I didn't think so. Inside, Lena sat on the living room floor, surrounded by dolls and coloring books. She looked up when Ashford walked in. Daddy! She ran to him, arms outstretched. He picked her up and held her tightly. Hey, sweetheart, why are the police here? They're just checking to make sure everything's safe. Like superheroes? Yeah, like superheroes. She seemed satisfied with that answer and wriggled out of his arms, returning to her coloring book. Marion stood in the doorway, watching. Thomas, what's going on? He motioned for her to follow him into the kitchen, out of Lena's earshot. There's a man, someone I sentenced years ago. His name is Caleb Rourke. Marion's face went pale. You think he's doing this? I don't know. But the timing, it's not a coincidence. What did you sentence him for? Corruption, fraud. He was a prosecutor. He destroyed lives. I gave him 5 years. And now he's out. He's been out for 3 years. Marion leaned against the counter, processing. So why now? Why wait 3 years? I don't know. But even as he said it, he thought about the warrant, the one he'd denied just days ago. The one with Rourke's name on it. Maybe it wasn't about waiting. Maybe it was about timing. Ashford stayed until the sun went down. He helped Lena with her coloring. He checked the locks on every door and window. He made sure Marion had his number, the precinct's number, and instructions to call at the first sign of anything unusual. When he finally left, he sat in his car for a long time, staring at the house. Everything looked normal, quiet, safe, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He pulled out his phone and called a private investigator he'd worked with on previous cases, a man who didn't ask unnecessary questions. I need you to find someone for me, Caleb Rourke. I need to know where he is, what he's doing, and if he's been anywhere near this address. The investigator agreed. Ashford hung up and started the car. As he pulled away from the curb, he glanced in the rearview mirror. For just a moment, just a split second, he thought he saw a figure standing at the end of the street, watching. The next morning, Marion called at 6:47 a.m. Ashford answered on the first ring. Thomas. Her voice was different. Not scared, not controlled, broken. She's gone. The words didn't register at first. What? Lena. She's gone. I went to wake her up and she's not in her room. She's not in the house. Thomas, she's gone. The phone slipped from Ashford's hand. He stared at the wall, his mind blank, his chest hollow. And somewhere, in a place he couldn't see, couldn't reach, couldn't stop, his daughter was gone. Ashford didn't remember driving to the house. One moment he was standing in his apartment, staring at the wall. The next he was pulling into Marion's driveway, his hands numb on the steering wheel. Police cars were already there, lights flashing, officers moving in and out of the house like ants. He got out of the car and walked toward the front door. His legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. Marion was sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket. Her face was blank, empty, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything that made her human. An officer tried to stop him. "Sir, this is an active scene. I'm her father." The officer stepped aside. Ashford knelt in front of Marion. She didn't look at him. "When?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. I put her to bed at 8. I checked on her at 10. She was asleep. This morning she was just gone. The window? Locked from the inside. The doors? Locked." Ashford stood and walked into the house. Lena's room was on the second floor. Small, pink walls, stuffed animals on the shelves, a bed, shaped like a castle. The bed was empty. The blankets were pulled back neatly, like someone had folded them, like someone had taken their time. Ashford walked to the window. Locked. He checked the closet. Empty except for clothes. He knelt and looked under the bed. Nothing. Just absence. Detective entered the room. Mid-40s, gray hair, the kind of face that had seen too much. "Judge Ashford?" Ashford didn't turn around. "Detective Brian Hollis. I'm the lead on this case. Have you found anything?" "Not yet. No signs of forced entry. No prints, no witnesses. We're canvassing the neighborhood now." "What about cameras?" "We're checking, but this street doesn't have much coverage." Ashford finally turned to face him. "Someone took her. Someone planned this." Hollis nodded slowly. "We're working on that assumption. Then work faster." By noon, the media had descended. News. Vans lined the street. Reporters stood on lawns, speaking into cameras with practiced sympathy. Helicopters circled overhead. Ashford watched from inside the house as a reporter gave her report. The daughter of Judge Thomas Ashford, a prominent figure in the local judicial system, disappeared. Overnight under mysterious circumstances. Police have yet to release any information about suspects, but sources say the investigation is being treated as a potential abduction. Another reporter on a different channel. Judge Ashford has a long history of tough sentencing. Some are asking, could this be revenge? And another, no signs of forced entry, no ransom demand, no witnesses. It's as if she simply vanished. Marion sat on the couch, staring at nothing. Ashford turned off the TV. "They're vultures," Marion said quietly. "I know. They don't care about her, they just want..." Story. Ashford didn't respond, because she was right. The tragedy wasn't a tragedy to them. It was content. A headline, a ratings boost, a story to tell over dinner. Detective Hollis returned in the afternoon with an update. "We found something. A security camera 2 blocks over caught a vehicle. Driving through the area around 2 a.m. Dark sedan, no plates visible." "That's it? We're tracing the route, seeing if we can get a better angle from other cameras." "What about Caleb Rourke?" Hollis frowned. "Who?" "Caleb Rourke. I sentenced him 8 years ago. He's been watching this house." Hollis pulled out a notepad. "You're sure about that?" "My ex-wife saw him twice." "Did she get a positive ID?" "No, but the timing isn't evidence, Judge." Ashford's jaw tightened. "Then make it evidence. Find him, bring him in." Hollis hesitated, then nodded. "I'll look into it." That night, Ashford sat alone in his apartment. He hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, couldn't think about anything except Lena's empty bed. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He stared at it for a long moment before opening it. It was a photo. Lena's coloring book, the one she'd been working on the day before, open to a page with a half-finished drawing of a house. Ashford's hand started to shake. Beneath the photo, a message. "Do you still believe the law is bigger than the man?" The same phrase from the anonymous letter sent to the police weeks ago. Ashford's vision blurred. His chest tightened. He couldn't breathe. Someone had her. Someone had his daughter, and they wanted him to know. The next morning, another message arrived at the police station. Not a text, a physical letter. Plain envelope, no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. "You took something from me once. Now I've taken something from you. Let's see if your precious law can get her back." No signature, but at the bottom of the page, a single word, printed carefully. Rourke. Detective Hollis showed the letter to Ashford. "We're bringing him in." Ashford stared at the page. And for the first time in 23 years, he felt something he'd never allowed himself to feel on the bench. Hate. Caleb Rourke wasn't hard to find. He was living in a small apartment on the east side of the city, 3rd floor, single bedroom. The kind of place people lived when they were starting over, or when they'd lost everything. Detective Hollis and 2 uniformed officers knocked on the door at 7 a.m. Rourke answered in sweatpants and a t-shirt, coffee mug in hand. He looked at the officers with mild curiosity. No panic, no surprise. "Can I help you?" Hollis held up his badge. "Caleb Rourke? That's me. We need you to come down to the station, answer some questions." Rourke took a slow sip of coffee. "About what?" "A missing child." Rourke's expression didn't change. He set the mug down carefully on a side table. "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet, but we can make that happen if you'd prefer." Rourke smiled faintly. "No need. I'll cooperate." He grabbed a jacket and followed them downstairs without another word. At the station, Rourke sat in the interrogation room like he owned it. Hollis and his partner, Detective Lisa Ortega, sat across from him. A recorder sat between them on the table. "Where were you 2 nights ago between midnight and 6 a.m.? Hollis asked. "At home, asleep. Anyone verify that?" "No. I live alone." Ortega leaned forward. "You know Judge Thomas Ashford?" It wasn't a question. Rourke nodded. "I do." "You have a history with him." "I was convicted in his courtroom 8 years ago." "Yes." "You were disbarred, sent to prison, lost your career." "That's correct. And you blame him for that." Rourke tilted his head slightly. "I blame myself for my mistakes. But I also recognize that Judge Ashford took a certain satisfaction in my sentencing. He's not as impartial as he pretends to be." Hollis slid a piece of paper across the table, the anonymous letter. "Do you recognize this?" Rourke read it slowly, then looked up. "No. Your name is on it." "That's not my handwriting. We'll verify that." "Please do." Ortega opened a folder and pulled out a printed text message, the photo of Lena's coloring book. "What about this?" Rourke studied it. "A coloring book. What about it?" "It was sent to Judge Ashford from an unknown number. The message referenced something you said to police weeks ago." Rourke frowned. "I never spoke to police weeks ago." Hollis leaned back. "So someone's using your words, your identity, framing you." "Apparently." "Or," Ortega said coldly, "you're lying." Rourke met her gaze without flinching. "If I wanted to hurt Judge Ashford, I wouldn't be stupid enough to sign my name to it." The room went quiet. Hollis stood. "Wait here." He and Ortega stepped outside. "What do you think?" Ortega asked. Hollis shook his head. "He's too calm. Either he's innocent or he's very, very good. We need to search his apartment. Already got the warrant. Team's on their way." 2 hours later, the search team came back empty. No evidence, no photos of Lena, no coloring book, no burner phones. Nothing that connected Rourke to the crime. But they did find something else. A storage unit, rented under Rourke's name 3 months ago. Hollis and Ortega drove there immediately. The unit was small. Climate-controlled, locked with a heavy padlock. They cut it open. Inside, boxes, files, papers, years of legal documents from Rourke's time as a prosecutor. And in the back corner, a folder. Hollis opened it. Inside were newspaper clippings, all about Judge Thomas Ashford, cases he'd presided over, sentences he'd handed down, profiles, interviews, dozens of them. "He's been watching him," Ortega said quietly. Hollis flipped through the pages, and then he found something else, a handwritten list, names, addresses, phone numbers, people Ashford had sentenced. Marion's address was on the list, circled in red. Back at the station, Hollis confronted Rourke. "Why do you have a list of people Judge Ashford sentenced?" "Research." "For what?" "A book. I've been writing about the flaws in the judicial system. Ashford is a case study." "And Marion's address?" "Public record. I was documenting his personal connections, seeing how his professional decisions affected his private life. That's called stalking." Rourke smiled. "It's called journalism." Hollis slammed his hand on the table. "A little girl is missing, and all roads lead back to you." Rourke's smile faded. He leaned forward. Slowly. "Detective, I understand you're under pressure. The media's watching, the public wants answers, and I'm an easy target. Ex-convict with a grudge. It writes itself. Then prove me wrong. I can't prove a negative. I didn't take that girl. I don't know where she is. And if you had any real evidence, I'd already be in a cell." Hollis stared at him, because Rourke was right. They had suspicion, motive, circumstantial connections, but no proof. That night, another letter arrived at the station. Same handwriting, same plain envelope. Inside, a single sentence. "You're looking in the wrong place, but keep looking, it's entertaining." And at the bottom, printed neatly, "P.S. The gardener has a record. Did you check him?" Hollis read it twice. Then he pulled up the file on Marion's neighborhood. There was a landscaping company that serviced several houses on the street. One of the workers had a prior conviction. Theft, breaking and entering. His name was Danny Frost. Hollis looked at Ortega. "Get him in here. Now." Danny Frost was 28 years old, rail-thin, with nervous eyes and dirt under his fingernails. He sat in the interrogation room fidgeting with his hands, glancing at the door every few seconds like he was calculating his chances of running. Hollis sat down across from him. "Relax, Danny. You're not under arrest. We just need to ask you some questions." "About what?" "You work for Green Valley Landscaping, right?" "Yeah." "You service homes in the Riverside neighborhood?" Danny nodded slowly. "Sometimes we rotate routes." "Were you working on Cypress Lane 2 nights ago?" Danny's eyes darted to the side. I don't remember." "You don't remember?" "We hit a lot of streets. I'd have to check the schedule." Ortega slid a photo across the table. "Marion's house." "What about this one? You recognize it?" Danny stared at the photo. His hand stopped moving. "Yeah, I've been there a few times." "Recently?" "Last week, maybe the week before." "Ever go inside?" "No, just the yard." Hollis leaned forward. "Danny, you have a record, breaking and entering, theft. That was 6 years ago. I did my time. I've been clean since." "Have you?" Danny's face flushed. "Yes." "Then why do you look so nervous?" Danny swallowed hard. "Because I know how this works. You need someone to blame, and I'm the easiest target." Hollis studied him for a long moment. Then he stood. "Wait here." Outside, Ortega pulled up Danny's file on her tablet. He did 18 months for breaking into a storage facility. Released 4 years ago. No arrests since. Employment? Green Valley hired him 2 years ago. No complaints, no issues. Hollis frowned. So, either he's clean or he's gotten better at not getting caught. Or someone's setting him up. Hollis thought about the letter. The one that conveniently mentioned the gardener. Run his financials. Check his apartment. Let's see if there's anything we missed. While the team worked on Danny Frost, Hollis returned to his desk and opened a file he'd been avoiding. Judge Thomas Ashford's case history, 23 years on the bench, thousands of cases, hundreds of convictions, and scattered among them, people whose lives had been destroyed, not just criminals, families, careers, reputations. Hollis scrolled through the list, flagging names. People who might have a grudge, people who might want revenge. There were dozens, but one name kept appearing in the margins of other cases. Caleb Rourke, not as a defendant, as a reference. Hollis dug deeper. 8 years ago, Rourke had been a rising star in the prosecutor's office. Sharp, ambitious, ruthless. He won cases other prosecutors wouldn't touch. But then an investigation revealed he'd been falsifying evidence, bribing witnesses, manipulating testimony to secure convictions. The trial was public, brutal, and the judge who presided over it, Thomas Ashford. Ashford had sentenced Rourke to 5 years in prison and permanent disbarment. But there was something else in the file. A transcript from the sentencing hearing. Hollis skimmed through it until he found what he was looking for. Ashford's final statement to Rourke, "You have betrayed the trust of this court, the integrity of the law, and the lives of those you were meant to serve. You are a disgrace to your profession, and you will carry that disgrace for the rest of your life." Rourke's response, "I'll remember that, Your Honor. Every word." Hollis sat back, in his chair. It wasn't just a conviction. It was personal. Late that afternoon, the forensics team finished processing Danny Frost's apartment. They found nothing. No evidence of Lena, no suspicious materials, no burner phones. His financials were clean. His alibi was shaky, but not impossible. Hollis released him with a warning. Danny left the station pale and shaking, looking over his shoulder every few steps. Hollis watched him go, then turned to Ortega. "He's not our guy." "Then who is?" Hollis pulled out the anonymous letters. He laid them side by side on his desk. "Whoever sent these wants us to chase shadows. First Rourke, then Frost. They're playing with us. So what do we do?" Hollis stared at the letters. "We stop playing their game." That evening, Hollis drove to Ashford's apartment. The judge answered the door looking like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were hollow, his face drawn. "Detective, can I come in?" Ashford stepped aside. Inside, the apartment was dark. Papers were scattered across the dining table, files, photos, case documents. "You're investigating yourself," Hollis said. "I'm looking for anyone I might have missed. Anyone with a motive." Hollis picked up one of the files. "Judge, I need you to be honest with me. How many people have you sentenced who might want revenge?" Ashford didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "Too many to count." "That's not helpful." "I know." Hollis set the file down. "Caleb Rourke, tell me about him." Ashford's jaw tightened. He was a prosecutor, a good one, until he wasn't. He destroyed lives to win cases. He deserved what he got. "He thinks you enjoyed it." "I did my job." "That's not what I asked." Ashford looked away. "Maybe I did. Maybe I wanted him to know what it felt like to lose everything." Hollis nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." He pulled out a folder and handed it to Ashford. Inside was a photocopy of an old newspaper article. The headline read, "Former prosecutor sentenced to 5 years. Judge Ashford. Justice has been served." Beneath the article was a photo of Rourke being led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. And in the background, barely visible, was Ashford. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at Rourke, and he was smiling. The name Caleb Rourke spread through the police department like a virus. Every detective had an opinion. Every officer had a theory. The man had motive. He had history. He had the intelligence to pull off something this clean. But he also had something else. An alibi. On the night Lena disappeared, Caleb Rourke had been at a public event, a legal ethics seminar held at the downtown convention center. Over 200 people in attendance. Security footage confirmed it. He checked in at 6 p.m., left at 11 p.m. The timeline didn't work. Lena had been taken sometime between midnight and 6 a.m. Rourke couldn't have been in two places at once. But Hollis wasn't convinced. He could have hired someone, Ortega suggested. Then where's the money trail? We've gone through his accounts, nothing unusual. Maybe he paid in cash. From what income? The guy works part-time at a legal clinic. He barely makes rent. Ortega crossed her arms. So what? We just let him walk? Hollis stared at the file. For now. 3 days later, Caleb Rourke gave an interview. Not to the police, to the media. A local news station invited him to speak about the criminal justice system, a segment on wrongful convictions and judicial overreach. Ashford watched it from his apartment, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. The host, a polished woman in her 40s, smiled at Rourke. You've been vocal about reform in the legal system. What drives that passion? Rourke leaned back, calm and composed. I've seen what happens when people in power forget they're human, when they hide behind their robes and their gavels, and convince themselves they're infallible. You're talking about judges. I'm talking about anyone who believes the system makes them untouchable. Do you think judges can be corrupt? Rourke smiled faintly. I think judges are people, and people are flawed, some more than others. The host leaned in. There are rumors you're connected to the recent disappearance of Judge Ashford's daughter. How do you respond to that? Rourke's expression didn't change. It's tragic. I hope she's found safe, but I had nothing to do with it. Some people say you have a grudge against Judge Ashford. Some people say a lot of things, but you were sentenced by him. You lost your career because of him. Rourke tilted his head. I lost my career because of my own choices. Judge Ashford just happened to be the one holding the gavel. But, he paused. But, the host prompted, some men wear robes and convince themselves that absolves them of the destruction they cause. They forget that justice isn't a title. It's a responsibility. The camera zoomed in on his face. And when they forget that, consequences follow. Ashford turned off the TV. His hands were shaking. Marion called 5 minutes later. Did you see it? I saw it. Thomas, he's taunting you. He's playing with you. I know. Then why isn't he in jail? Because we don't have proof. He took her. I know he did. I know. Marion's voice cracked. Then do something. Ashford closed his eyes. I'm trying. But even... As he said it, he felt helpless. Rourke was always one step ahead, always just out of reach, like he knew exactly what they were thinking, exactly what they'd do next. That night, another message arrived. Not to the police, to Ashford's personal email. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained a single sentence. You sent me to prison for 5 years. How long will you search for her before you give up? No signature, but Ashford didn't need one. He forwarded it to Hollis immediately. The detective called him within the hour. We traced the IP, public library, downtown. Branch. No cameras in the computer area. Of course not. Judge, he's playing a game. He wants you to react. He wants you emotional. He has my daughter. We don't know that for sure. Ashford's voice went cold. Yes, we do. The next morning, the media picked up the interview. Headlines appeared across every major outlet. Ex-prosecutor speaks out on judicial corruption. Caleb Rourke. Justice is a responsibility, not a title. Is the system failing Judge Ashford? The public ate it up. Comment sections exploded. Some people defended Ashford, others questioned his past rulings. Few even suggested he deserved what was happening. Marion stopped reading the news. Ashford couldn't. He watched as his life was dissected, his career scrutinized, his every decision questioned. And through it all, Caleb Rourke smiled. Not in triumph, in certainty, like a man watching dominoes fall. Exactly as he'd arranged them. Caleb Rourke walked into the police station voluntarily. No lawyer, no demands. just a calm, measured stride through the front doors like he was attending a business meeting. Hollis met him in the lobby. "Mr. Rourke, I didn't expect to see you here." Rourke smiled. I thought I could help." "Help?" "With the investigation. I've been thinking about the case. I might have some insights." Hollis studied him for a long moment. "You want to help us find a missing child." "I want to help you find the truth." Hollis gestured toward the interrogation room. "This way." Inside, Rourke sat down and folded his hands on the table. Ortega entered a moment later, carrying a file. She didn't sit, just stood against the wall, arms crossed. Hollis sat across from Rourke. "You said you have insights." "I do. I've been reviewing what's been made public about the case. The timeline, the lack of evidence, the anonymous messages. And it's too clean, too controlled. Whoever did this knows the system inside and out. Like you." Rourke didn't flinch. "Like me, or like anyone who's worked in law enforcement, prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges." Ortega stepped forward. "So you're saying a judge could have done this?" "I'm saying someone with legal training did this." Hollis leaned back. "Why would someone with legal training kidnap a child?" "Revenge, power, control." Rourke paused. "Or to make a point." "What point?" "That the system isn't as infallible as people think." The room went quiet. Hollis pulled out the anonymous letters. "These were sent to us and to Judge Ashford. They reference things only someone close to the case would know." Rourke read them carefully, then looked up. "May I?" He gestured to a pen on the table. Hollis slid it over. Rourke picked it up and wrote a single sentence on a blank sheet of paper. "You still believe the law is bigger than the man." He set the pen down and pushed the paper toward Hollis. "That's not my handwriting." Hollis compared it to the letters. He was right. The script was different. The slant. The spacing. "So someone's mimicking your words. Or framing me," Ortega scoffed. "Convenient." Rourke turned to her. "Detective, if I wanted to hurt Judge Ashford, I wouldn't leave breadcrumbs pointing back to me. I'd be smarter than that. Maybe you want to get caught. Maybe you want the attention." Rourke smiled faintly. "If I wanted attention, I wouldn't need to kidnap anyone. I'd just keep doing interviews." Hollis tapped the table. "You said you have insights. So give us something useful." Rourke leaned forward. "The letters. The messages. They're not just taunting. They're instructional." "What do you mean?" "Whoever's doing this is leading you. They want you to follow specific paths. First me, then the gardener. They're testing you, seeing how you react. Why? Because they're building a narrative, and when the time comes, they'll control how it ends." Ortega pushed off the wall. "That's a lot of speculation. It's pattern recognition. I spent years prosecuting criminals. The smart ones don't just commit crimes. They craft stories." Hollis studied him. "So what's the story here?" Rourke sat back. "A man loses everything. A judge takes it away. Years later, the judge loses something too, and everyone watches to see if justice works both ways. That sounds personal. It is personal, just not mine." The interview lasted 2 hours. Rourke answered every question, offered theories, pointed out inconsistencies in the investigation. He was helpful. Cooperative, almost too cooperative. When he finally left, Ortega turned to Hollis. "He's playing us." "I know. So why'd you let him talk?" "Because he gave us something." "What?" Hollis pulled out his notepad. "He said the person doing this is crafting a story, building a narrative. So we need to figure out what story they're trying to tell." That night, Ashford received another message. This time it wasn't text. It was a voice recording. He pressed play. A distorted voice spoke, slow, deliberate. "You taught me something, Thomas. You taught me that justice isn't about truth. It's about who tells the better story, who has the better evidence, the better lawyer, the better performance." A pause. "So I'm telling a story now, and you're the audience." Another pause. Let's see if you can figure out the ending before I write it. The recording ended. Ashford played it again, and again. The voice was unrecognizable, but the words, they sounded like something Rourke would say, or something someone wanted him to think Rourke would say. Ashford grabbed his phone and called Hollis. He sent another message. "Forward it to me." Ashford did. Then he sat in the dark, staring at his phone, waiting for the next move, knowing it would come, and knowing he wouldn't be ready for it. The case became a spectacle. Every news outlet ran stories. Every podcast dissected theories. Social media exploded with armchair detectives offering solutions, accusations, and judgments. Judge I.J. Thomas Ashford's face was everywhere, and so was Caleb Rourke's. The narrative split cleanly down the middle. Half the country believed Rourke was guilty, a vengeful ex-convict with motive and means, a man who'd lost everything and wanted to make someone else feel the same pain. The other half wasn't so sure. They pointed to the lack of evidence, the convenient alibis, the way everything seemed too neat, too controlled. Some even suggested Ashford himself was involved, a desperate father staging his own daughter's disappearance for, what? Sympathy? Attention? The theories were endless and cruel. Marion stopped leaving the house. The reporters camped outside her door wouldn't let her breathe. Every time she stepped out, microphones were shoved in her face. "Do you think Caleb Rourke took your daughter? How do you feel about your ex-husband's involvement? Is there anything you, want to say to the person who did this?" She said nothing, just kept her head down and went back inside. But the pressure didn't stop. Inside the police department, the pressure was worse. The mayor called Hollis directly. "This case is making us look incompetent. We're doing everything we can. It's not enough. The public wants answers. They want an arrest. We can't arrest someone without evidence. Then find evidence." The call ended. Hollis sat at his desk, staring at the case file. He'd been a detective for 16 years. He'd worked murders, assaults, fraud. But this case was different. Every lead turned into smoke. Every suspect had an explanation. Every piece of evidence raised more questions than it answered. Ortega sat down across from him. Forensics came back on the voice recording. "It's been digitally altered. No way to identify the original speaker." "Of course. It is." They did find something, though. Background noise, faint, could be traffic, could be a train. That narrows it down to half the city. Ortega sighed. "The prosecutor's office is pushing us. They want someone charged by the end of the week." "Based on what?" "Based on public pressure." Hollis threw his pen across the desk. "This isn't about justice, it's about optics. Welcome to modern policing." 3 days later, the pressure reached a breaking point. A new piece of evidence surfaced. A fingerprint. It was found on the envelope of one of the anonymous letters, buried in the corner. Partial but identifiable. The print belonged to Caleb Rourke. Hollis stared at the report. "How did we miss this?" The forensic tech shrugged. "It was faint, easy to overlook, but it's definitely his." Ortega looked at Hollis. "That's it. That's enough." "Enough for what?" "A fingerprint on Nia. An envelope doesn't prove he took her. It proves he sent the letters. It proves he's lying." Hollis hesitated. Everything in him said this was too easy, too convenient. But the mayor was breathing down his neck. The prosecutor's office was demanding action. The public was screaming for answers. And a little girl was still missing. "Get the warrant," Hollis said quietly. Caleb Rourke was arrested at his apartment the next morning. He didn't resist, didn't argue, just smiled that same cold smile and held out his wrist for the cuffs. "Detective Hollis, I was wondering when you'd come." "You have the right to remain silent." "I know my rights. I wrote them for people for years." They led him to the car. Cameras were everywhere. Reporters shouted questions. The crowd outside his building cheered. Rourke looked directly at one of the cameras as he was placed in the back seat, and he smiled. Not the smile of a guilty man. the smile of someone who'd been expecting this all along. The arraignment was fast. The prosecutor laid out the charges: kidnapping, obstruction of justice, harassment, the evidence, the fingerprint, the letters, the motive. Rourke's public defender asked for bail. The judge denied it. Rourke was remanded to custody pending trial. As he was led out of the courtroom, he turned and looked directly at the gallery, at Thomas Ashford. Ashford sat in the back row, his face pale, his hands gripping the bench in front of him. Rourke held his gaze for a long moment. Then he mouthed two words: "Not yet." That night, the district attorney held a press conference. "We believe we have the person responsible for Lena Ashford's disappearance in custody. This investigation is ongoing, but we are confident justice will be served." The media erupted with questions. Marion watched from her living room, tears streaming down her face. Ashford watched from his apartment, his hands shaking. And in a holding cell downtown, Caleb Rourke lay on a narrow cot, staring at the ceiling, smiling, because the trial was exactly what he wanted. And the real story was just beginning. The trial was set for 6 weeks later, fastest turnaround anyone had seen in years. The district attorney wanted it done. The mayor wanted it done. The public demanded it. And in a controversial decision that shocked legal observers across the country, the presiding judge would be Thomas Ashford himself. The announcement came from the State Judicial Council. A symbolic gesture, they said, a demonstration that the law applied equally to everyone, that even in the face of personal tragedy, justice would be impartial. Critics called it insane, unethical, a mockery of the judicial system. But Ashford accepted. He stood before the council, hollow-eyed and exhausted, and said 4 words: "I'll see it through." Marion begged him not to. "Thomas, you can't. You're too close. You'll destroy yourself." "I'm already destroyed." "Then don't let him destroy you further." But Ashford had made up his mind. He would sit on that bench. He would hear the evidence. And he would make sure Caleb Rourke paid for what he'd done. The day the trial began, the courthouse was packed, every seat filled. Reporters lined the walls, cameras positioned at every angle. Outside, protesters gathered. Some held signs supporting Ashford. Others demanded his recusal. It was a circus. Ashford entered through a side door, avoiding the crowds. He wore his robe. His face was stone. He took his seat at the bench and looked out over the courtroom. And there, at the defense table, sat Caleb Rourke. He wore a suit, clean-shaven, calm. He looked more like a lawyer than a defendant. When Ashford's eyes met his, Rourke smiled, not with malice, not with anger, with certainty. The bailiff called the court to order. All rise, the Honorable Judge Thomas Ashford presiding. The room stood. Ashford's voice was steady as he spoke. "Please be seated. We are here for the case of the state versus Caleb Rourke. Charges include kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and criminal harassment." He paused. "Let the record show that I am aware of my personal connection to this case. I have disclosed this to both parties. The defendant has waived his right to request my recusal." The prosecutor stood. "The state is ready, Your Honor." The defense attorney, a tired-looking public defender named Morris, stood as well. "The defense is ready." Ashford nodded. "Then we'll begin with opening statements." The prosecutor stepped forward, outlining the case with clinical precision. The evidence, the motive, the timeline. Morris countered weakly, arguing reasonable doubt and lack of direct evidence. But it was clear to everyone watching. This trial had already been decided in the court of public opinion. And then Caleb Rourke stood. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Morris tried to stop him. "Mr. Rourke, I advise." Rourke waved him off. "I'd like to make a statement." Ashford's jaw tightened. "Proceed." Rourke turned to face the courtroom. Cameras focused on him. Every eye in the room locked on his face. He spoke slowly, deliberately. "I've always admired this courtroom, the architecture, the history, the idea that justice happens here." He paused. "I never imagined that one day it would admire me back. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ashford's hand tightened on his gavel. Rourke turned back to him. Let's see if it still works. The prosecution called Detective Hollis first. He explained the investigation, the anonymous letters, the fingerprint found on one envelope. And this print belongs to the defendant? The prosecutor asked. Yes. During cross-examination, the defense attorney asked, just one print, on the corner? Correct. Could it have been placed there before the letter was written? Hollis hesitated. Possibly. Next came a forensic analyst. He testified about Rourke's storage unit, newspaper clippings about Ashford, research on his family. But, did you find any direct evidence? Photos of the victim, her belongings? No. The final witness was a forensic technician. She described the evidence handling process. The defense asked, were there any irregularities? She paused. A few minor issues, timestamps that didn't align, evidence bags, not logged immediately. Issues. Yes. The courtroom shifted uncomfortably. Ashford watched from the bench. For the first time, doubt crept in. A week into the trial, something changed. An independent auditor was brought in to review the evidence, standard procedure in high-profile cases. His name was Gerald Hutchins, retired federal investigator, no allegiance to either side. He spent 3 days reviewing every piece of evidence, every document, every photograph, every chain of custody form. When he took the stand, the courtroom was packed. The prosecutor asked him to summarize his findings. Hutchins adjusted his glasses. I found several inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? The fingerprint on the envelope was isolated. No other prints from the defendant anywhere on the letter itself. That's unusual. Meaning it's possible the print was transferred, or the envelope was handled separately from the letter. The prosecutor's face tightened. Anything else? The timestamps on some evidence don't match the official logs. Small discrepancies, minutes, but discrepancies nonetheless. Could those be clerical errors? They could be, or they could indicate the evidence was processed out of order. The courtroom murmured. One more thing, Hutchins continued. The anonymous letters. The phrasing is sophisticated, legal terminology, but it's also theatrical, almost like someone wanted them to be connected to Mr. Rourke. Are you saying the IC evidence was planted? I'm saying it's suspiciously convenient. During recess, Hollis found Hutchins in the hallway. You think someone manipulated the evidence? Hutchins looked at him. I think someone wanted a quick conviction. Whether that's you, the prosecutor, or someone else, I don't. No. Hollis's stomach dropped. That night, he couldn't sleep. He went back to the station and pulled the case file. Every report, every photo, every note, and he saw it. Small things, details he'd missed because he'd been under so much pressure. Evidence that appeared too perfectly, leads that materialized exactly when they were needed. It wasn't just convenience, it was orchestration. Someone had built this case, piece by piece, and Caleb Rourke had let them. Hollis walked into the prosecutor's office without knocking. Angela Reeves looked up, startled. Detective, what? We need to talk about the evidence. She set down her pen. What about it? It's too clean, too convenient. Someone manipulated this case. Reeves's face hardened. That's a serious accusation. I know, but look at the timeline. Every piece of evidence appeared exactly when we needed it. The fingerprint, the letters, the storage unit. So what are you saying, that Rourke is innocent? I'm saying he's guilty, but not the way we think. Reeves stood. We have a trial happening right now. A jury, a judge. You can't just... Someone in this office was desperate for a conviction. They cut corners, maybe planted evidence. Her face went pale. Who? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. That afternoon, Hollis interviewed the junior prosecutor who'd initially handled the case file, a young man named Derek Pines, ambitious, eager to prove himself. Derek, walk me through how you processed the evidence. Standard procedure, everything by the book. The fingerprint, when did it show up in the system? Derek hesitated. I'm not sure. It was flagged by forensics. After how long? A week, maybe 2. 2 weeks? For a partial print? It was faint, easy to miss. Hollis leaned. Steward? Or easy to add later? Derek's face went white. I would never, but someone did. The next day in court, Hollis requested to speak with the judge privately. Ashford called both attorneys into chambers. What is this about, detective? Hollis took a breath. Your Honor, I have reason to believe the evidence against Mr. Rourke was manipulated. Silence. Reeves shot to her feet. That's absurd. Is it? Hollis turned to her. We were under enormous pressure. The mayor, the media, the public. Everyone wanted someone arrested. Fast. Ashford's hands gripped the desk. Are you telling me this case is compromised? I'm telling you it's not as solid as we thought. Morris, the defense attorney, spoke quietly. Then we need to halt the trial. Ashford stared at Hollis. Do you believe Rourke is innocent? No. I believe he's guilty. But I also believe he wanted to be caught. He orchestrated this. He knew we'd be desperate enough to take shortcuts. Ashford's face went cold. He played us. The trial resumed the next morning, but the atmosphere had changed. The certainty was gone, replaced by something heavier. Doubt. Ashford sat on the bench, his face carved from stone. Reeves called her final witness, a handwriting expert who testified the anonymous letters matched linguistic patterns Rourke used in old court documents. Morris destroyed him on cross-examination. Patterns aren't proof, are they? No, but so my client writes like a lawyer. So do thousands of lawyers. The witness had no answer. Then Morris did something unexpected. He called Caleb Rourke to the stand. The courtroom erupted. Ashford's gavel came down hard. Order! Rourke stood calmly and walked to the witness box. He was sworn in. Morris approached. Mr. Rourke, did you kidnap Lena Ashford? No. Did you send those anonymous letters? No. Did you want Judge Ashford to suffer? Rourke paused, then looked directly at Ashford. Yes. The room went silent. But not this way, not by taking a child. That's not justice. That's cruelty. Morris nodded. Then who did? This? I don't know. But someone wanted me to take the fall. Someone who knew I had motive. Someone who knew the system would rush to convict me. He turned to the jury. And it almost worked. During a recess, Ashford called Hollis into his chambers. You said he orchestrated this. Explain. Hollis laid out files on the desk. Every piece of evidence appeared at the exact moment we needed it. The letters, the fingerprint, the storage unit. It's too perfect. So someone planted it. Or Rourke planted it himself, to make us look incompetent, to force a trial based on lies. Ashford stared at the files. Why? Because his revenge wasn't escaping. It was making you convict him on false evidence, making you the villain. Ashford's voice was barely a whisper. He wanted me to fail. He wanted to destroy your integrity, and he's succeeding. That night, Ashford sat alone in the empty courtroom. He thought about every decision, every ruling, every word, and then he understood. Caleb Rourke hadn't taken his daughter to hurt him. He'd framed himself to force Ashford into an impossible choice: convict an innocent man based on lies, or let him go and live without answers. Either way, Ashford lost. The door opened behind him. Rourke stood in the doorway, flanked by guards. They're letting me make a statement tomorrow, Rourke said quietly. Thought you'd want to know. Ashford didn't turn around. You set this all up. I made it easy for people to believe what they wanted to believe. That's all. Where is she? Rourke smiled sadly. You condemned me twice, Thomas. The first time for my mistakes. The second. He paused. For your own. And he walked away. The final day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was silent. No murmurs, no whispers, just the weight of what was about to happen. Ashford sat on the bench, his face hollow. He'd barely slept, barely eaten. He looked like a man who'd aged 10 years in 10 days. Morris stood. "Your Honor, the defense rests." Reeves stood as well. "The prosecution rests." Ashford nodded slowly. Closing arguments. Reeves went first. She laid out the evidence methodically. The fingerprint, the letters, the motive. She painted Rourke as a man consumed by revenge, but her voice lacked conviction. Everyone heard it. Morris followed. He didn't need to say much. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case was built on desperation, on pressure, on the need for someone, anyone, to be held accountable. But justice doesn't work that way. Reasonable doubt isn't just reasonable here, it's overwhelming." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood. "On the charge of kidnapping, we find the defendant guilty." The courtroom exploded. Rourke didn't react. He just stood there, expressionless. Ashford's hands shook as he prepared to read the sentence. He looked down at Rourke, and Rourke looked back. Not with anger, not with triumph, with pity. "Caleb Rourke," Ashford began, his voice cracking. "You are hereby sentenced to death by lethal injection." Rourke smiled, not a cruel smile, a satisfied one. Like a man who just won a game no one else knew they were playing. As the guards led him away, Rourke paused and turned back. "You followed the law, Thomas," he said quietly. "Now live with the error." 6 months later, Caleb Rourke was executed. No appeals, no delays. He refused them all. Before he died, he left a letter. It was delivered to Ashford's home. Inside, one sentence. "Justice is a story we tell ourselves. You told yours, I told mine. Neither of us was right." Ashford read it once, then burned it. 3 weeks after the execution, new evidence surfaced. A confession. Not from Rourke, from someone else. A junior prosecutor named Derek Pines. The same man who'd processed the evidence. He'd been under unbearable pressure. The mayor threatening his job. The media demanding results. He'd planted the fingerprint, rushed the forensics, built the case piece by piece. Not because Rourke was innocent, but because he needed a conviction, fast. And Rourke had known. He'd seen the manipulation, seen the desperation, and he'd let it happen. Because his revenge wasn't freedom. It was forcing Ashford to sentence a man on false evidence, destroying the one thing Ashford valued most, his integrity. Ashford resigned quietly. No press conference, no statement, just a letter to the Judicial Council. Marion moved away with what remained of her life. The media moved on to the next story, and Lena's case remained officially closed. But Thomas Ashford never stopped searching. Every lead, every tip, every sleepless night, looking for the daughter he'd lost, and the truth he'd sentenced to death. A voice, calm and detached, closed the story. In the end, Caleb Rourke died. The system survived, but nothing was fixed, nothing was healed. It was just over. Justice is an idea, the system, a machine, and when a man becomes a cog, the truth is just noise. Some cases close, some wounds don't. This was both. The screen faded to black.